I was having this conversation with an acquaintance, and it's one you've probably had before, maybe even recently. It's one where we kind of ran into each other after a little bit of time, and it goes like this. You go up to them and say, "Hey, how's it going? What have you been up to lately?" And the answer is the same no matter who I talk to. "Oh, been busy. Been busy. Just busy." And I remember thinking about it, and because I responded the same way, as we talked about it, and I started thinking, okay, what have I been up to lately? And the reality was busyness, and the reality for them was probably the same. But I started to think, are they as busy as I am? I mean, I know you think you're busy, but... And I started to kind of make those judgments, kind of weighing okay, but do you do that? Yeah, but are you involved in that? Yeah, but you don't have to do this. And I start thinking about, you're really not as busy as you think you are. Let me tell you what busy looks like. There's this weird cultural excitement around busyness. We seem to think that if we're busy, we're important. And so we all respond. It doesn't matter what we've been. I don't know if I've gone up to anybody, especially other people my age with young kids or whatever. I don't know if I've gone up to any of them and said, "Hey, what's been going on lately?" And they're like, "Nothing. I've been doing nothing." Everybody wants to say how busy they are. We want to tell you, we want to make sure you understand how important we are because we're so busy. I'm busy at church. My kids are involved in stuff. I'm busy at work. We're doing stuff at home. It's always something. There's something that we've done where we have elevated the idolatry of busyness. And I think it's a problem. I go to this pastor's conference every year in April, and it is a bunch of our regions in the Midwest that get together for a conference. And it's one of those interesting things where you get a bunch of pastors together, you start talking about life and ministry, and one, we all think we're the busiest. Two, it sometimes turns into a question of, okay, so how much vacation have you taken this year? You start talking about, and sometimes it comes up in some of our study, and in some of our leaders start kind of pushing those questions because pastors are notorious for not. But we start asking, well, I get 4 weeks, but I've only taken 2 this year. Kind of puff up your chest a little bit. It happens amongst all of us, I think. And we catch ourselves. I don't know. I know that I see this at home, and I see it in friends, and you probably do it too. When you get a day off, it's hard to rest. When I get a day off, I take Fridays off, and especially during the school year, my kids and Katie are all at work, or at school. So they're all at school, and I have this day off where nobody's around. And I think this is going to be a great day to rest. And then all I can think about is how much laundry needs to be done, how many dishes are on the counter, and what things will please my wife when she gets home because they're done. And I start kind of not doing what I'm there to do, which is to actually take some moments of rest. And then I don't do any of those things and go for a run. But anyway, that's my struggle with rest. You probably have it too. It's cultural. We're addicted to busyness. And you know what? Social media has made that even more difficult because what do we constantly post about our lives online? We post all the good stuff. We take pictures on vacation. We show everybody on the parade. We show all these great things that we're doing. We never show sitting around doing nothing in my living room. And so what it looks like is, and in fact this is something that's created amongst the youngest generation, that's called fear of missing out, FOMA, and that's actually been coined as a term because the youngest generation feels like if they do anything, they're missing everything else. There's this absolute fear of missing it because if you look, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, Snapchat, whatever it is, if you look, everybody else is doing amazing things, and what am I doing? Nothing. Nothing exciting. So you start to feel worse about yourself because everybody else is busy. Everybody else is doing great things. It's cultural. Rest is not important. It's learned. For me, I moved out of my parents' house when I was 17 because they had moved away, and I wanted to go back and finish high school. Moved in with a family from my church, and I had to work, and I had to kind of make sure that I had gas in the car and food to eat, and then every month I would go back and I would travel to where my parents were and visit them. And every time I found out something, I learned that every time I had to go eat or go to sleep, it took time away from the people I wanted to spend my time with. So I started to hate those things. I didn't like rest. I didn't like sleep because it's time that I'm not around the people I want to be around. And eating just takes more time if I'm not with them. And I learned this thing, that rest is just not worth the trouble. But this is not the perspective of our God. This isn't the perspective that we've been given from the Bible. So I want to walk you through a couple of those. A history of rest according to the Scriptures. The first one we saw read by Jay earlier in the service, as God rested after creating the earth. Now, we have a God who is all-powerful. He does not need a break. And yet, he chose to. It goes on in Genesis chapter 2. So the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them was completed. On the seventh day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all of his work. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because it was a day when he rested from all his work of creation. So we see God resting. He goes on as we find his people in the Exodus. Moses has led them out of Egypt, and now they're in the wilderness. In Exodus chapter 16, it says this. After this, the people gathered the food morning by morning, each family according to its need, as God had provided for them food on the ground every day. And as the sun became hot, the flakes they'd not picked up melted and disappeared. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much as usual, 4 quarts for each person instead of 2. Then all the leaders of the community came and asked Moses for an explanation. He told them, "This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow will be a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath day set apart for the Lord. So bake or boil as much as you want today, and set aside what is left for tomorrow." So they put some aside until morning, just as Moses had commanded. And in the morning the leftover food was wholesome and good, without maggots or odor. And Moses said, "Eat this food today, for today is a Sabbath day dedicated to the Lord. There will be no food on the ground today. You may gather the food for 6 days, but the 7th day is the Sabbath. There will be no food on the ground that day." God sees the need in his people. You have to eat. There are 3 things we know. We have to eat, we have to drink, and we have to sleep. Those are important for our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. And God knows it. And so even in the wilderness, this manna that's been provided, normally if they gather it up and they eat it, and if they try and save it, it'll be moldy and full of maggots by the next day, but not on day 7. Because God recognizes and is teaching his people about rest. Goes on in Exodus 35, as they build the tabernacle. Moses called together the whole community of Israel and told them, "These are the instructions the Lord has commanded you to follow. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the 7th day must be a Sabbath day of complete rest, a holy day dedicated to the Lord. Anyone who works on that day must be put to death. You must not even light a fire in any of your homes on the Sabbath." So what we know is God is not impressed with your busyness, your ability to never stop and take a break. The creator of the universe took a day of rest, not because he needed it, but because he wanted to show us that we do. And yet in our culture today, we have lost the ability to rest. We may get a day off of work, but then what do? projects, work at home, all sorts of other things that we're doing. And sometimes we miss completely the call to rest, to be rejuvenated. Jesus didn't miss it. A few weeks ago, we talked about the story where Jesus and his disciples are on a boat, and it starts to storm, and where's Jesus? Asleep in the boat. Jesus had no problem resting. He did it all the time. People were after him all the time. Crowds wanted to talk to him. People needed healed. His disciples had questions, and yet Jesus, over and over again, would either get away and sleep or get away and pray and be with his Father. But he never had a problem getting away for rest because he recognized how important it was. On the boat, the storm is going crazy. The disciples are freaking out, and Jesus is asleep inside. I always picture him as they come and get him up, just kind of rubbing his eyes and also rolling his eyes at the fear of his disciples when he says, "What are you so worried about?" He gets up and calls the wind and the waves to settle down. Yesterday in our parade, my favorite part was I got to ride my little electric unicycle instead of walking in the parade. So I didn't have to exert nearly as much effort as many people. But I've got this little wheel, and it's like a Segway without a handle. Many of you have seen it, and you just stand on it and lean forward, and it goes. And it's a blast to ride around. But it came with this little beeper, and what it did was if you started going too fast, it would beep at you, and it got really annoying. So I took it apart and cut the little cord to the speaker so that it wouldn't beep at me all the time. The problem is, it also has these 4 lights on the top, and as the battery goes down, each one of those lights goes out. And once it gets down to about 15% battery, it's supposed to flash those lights and beep at me to let me know that I am almost out of battery. Because with a lithium-ion battery, you may know from your phone, it's either on or it's off. You know, old batteries used to kind of slow down and make their way down when they got low. Not these. On or off. So if I'm riding my wheel and the battery gets low, what happens is it stops. I don't. This is a problem. And I've had it for about 3 years. Batteries are getting a little older. They don't last quite as long. And I am terrified when those lights get down to 1. Because I don't have a beep to remind me that it's going to stop. And I've had it stop on me before. It's not a lot of fun. Those broken ribs had to heal. But it reminds me of the need to recharge. I know that I've got to pay attention because it affects what's going to happen to me physically. If I'm riding my wheel and it gets all the way down and it needs charged, I've got to recharge it. But for some reason, we have a tendency to think that we don't need the same. But the reality is we do. We need to recharge, and it's not just because physically we need it, but God recognized that spiritually we need it too. We need a chance to stop and to rest in Him. This morning, I want to call you to rest. So many reasons. God said it, and He modeled it. Jesus lived it. Science proves that rest is important. We just have to do it. And this is a really tough time for me to tell you that. School's about to start. Teachers are going back to work this week. Kids, everything's kind of firing up. So many times we kind of take a little off in the summer. We're going to start with new stuff here at church as Discovery Club kicks back off and all those kinds of ministries continue, and it gets harder and harder to rest as we get into this new season. But we are called to this obedience. We are called to be obedient to God's command that we rest. In fact, in Exodus, He said, if you don't rest, you will be put to death. Now, no worries, that's not happening. But science tells us that if we don't rest, death is coming sooner because our bodies need it, our minds need it, our hearts need it. So this morning, if you felt convicted by any of that, if your busyness is outweighing your rest, this is a chance to take a step back and let God rejuvenate you through some time with him. Let's pray.